Hand over now to Dr. Pearce from HBRIC with the presentation that is strangely missing from the screen. Leanne.
Thank you, Chairman. Good afternoon, everyone. So I'll try not to mess up with the PowerPoint again. The purpose today is, as it says here, to give you an update on the status to sign off on the conditions set by the Council in June 2014 and to enable us to progress as a consequence of that to contracts and eventually to commence construction. Our view is that the case for the RWSS is compelling. It's a once-in-a-generation opportunity to make a lasting positive impact on a number of dimensions, and that's what we're here to explain today. My colleagues and I on the HBRIC board are here to create value for the Council as shareholders and ultimately for you, and not just financially but on a number of dimensions that are set out in our statement of intent. And we strongly believe that the RWSS will achieve these goals, and I'll come back to this point towards the end of our conversation this afternoon. As far as we're aware, there are no other opportunities in Hawke's Bay that would either be of this scale or the comprehensiveness of the set of impacts that are positive for the region. Council decided in June 14 on the basis of a comprehensive business case to invest in this project, subject to the meeting of conditions precedent and some other preconditions, and that is what we're here to try and confirm today. But I want to go on to just recapitulate, if you like, why we think that the case for the RWSS is compelling. There are a large number of environmental benefits that come from this scheme. I know some of you in the audience don't think that's true, but I just want to go through a few of them. From the irrigation, and this is independently assessed by Niwa, return flows, that's water that leaks out of the bottom of the soil profile and into the groundwater, will be in the order of 20 million cubic metres a year. Already with the contracts that are signed up, 8 million cubic metres a year of current groundwater extraction, which is essentially half of the current groundwater extraction in Central Hawke's Bay, will be turned off. Those two combined support significant recharge of the aquifer in Central Hawke's Bay, and they increase low flows in the Tuki and the Waipawa in Central Hawke's Bay by more than what is required in Plan Change 6 in 2018. Those increases in flow, combined with the minimum flow that is required to be released at the foot of the dam, generate somewhat more than 2 cubic metres per second of low flows in the Tuki, and that is more than is required to achieve the 2023 minimum flow at Red Bridge that's set in Plan Change 6. Plan Change 6 sets an increase of 1.7 cubic metres in the low flow, and our view is that that will be more than easily surpassed in the first year of the RWSS. In addition to that, under consent conditions, there's 4 million cubic metres of flushing flows set up in 4 flows of 1 million cubic metres each, no more than 30 days apart, and those are intended to manage and control the growth of periphyton and cyanobacteria in the river, and these conditions are set by the Board of Inquiry of the EPA, and they are intended to deliver safer and healthier rivers. The RWSS was designed and has been consented in a fashion to support Plan Change 6. Without the RWSS, your council has to find other ways to achieve, among other things, but these are probably the most difficult, the minimum flows that are set in Plan Change 6. If If it doesn't have the RWSS, there's probably only a couple of ways that you can do that. One is to invest in some storage somewhere anyway, to deliver water to sustain minimum flows. Or the council could suspend or limit the current irrigation consents, both takes from the river and takes from groundwater. And it might do a combination of both of those. In the 2014 business case provided an estimate of the costs of doing both of those things, and that's in the region of $40 to $60 million of cost to the regional council, to ratepayers and to farmers if you don't have the RWSS. Included in the conditions of the RWSS, there's 6 large biodiversity enhancement projects. I won't go through them all here, but there's an upstream catchment enhancement, $2.5 million, riparian enhancement over a substantial length of the Makaroro and the Upper Waipawa, $1.75 million, threatened species habitat for a range of species, another $3 million, enhancement of spring-fed streams, much smaller at only $500,000, restoration of the old Waipawa riverbed and the Papanui stream, another $1.3 million, and a significant project in the lower Tukituki and also in the lower Narororo and the lower Tutaikuri to enhance native fish habitat in particular, and those are all paid for by the water users. They will be paid for by the limited partnership that will operate the Ruataniwha Water Storage Scheme. So both those increases in the minimum flows and the biodiversity enhancements are effectively paid for by water users. That's how it should be. They're taking a publicly owned natural resource and they should be paying for some environmental enhancement and to internalise the costs to the environment of this project. As I said, without the RWSS, the biodiversity projects will not occur. For council to achieve Plan Change 6 minimum flows will be costly and difficult without the RWSS. And if council made the potentially politically difficult decision to reduce either river takes or groundwater takes or both in Central Hawke's Bay, there would be significant economic harm to the agricultural production in Central Hawke's Bay. There's a substantial economic stimulus over the life of the project. The 2012 reports on the regional economic benefits said $3.7 billion of added value, not total value, of added value to the economy. Distributed a quarter on farm in Central Hawke's Bay, a quarter off farms in Central Hawke's Bay, and the other half in the wider regional economy. Even if that number is overstated by a factor of 4, it's still close to $1 billion of added value benefits to the Hawke's Bay region. I challenge anyone in this room to come up with another project that will deliver those kinds of economic benefits. There are an additional 2,500 or more jobs in the most recent update of this work, which was reported to the council in this year. It's nearly 2,700 jobs. Again, distributed on farm in Central Hawke's Bay, distributed off farm in Central Hawke's Bay, and more widely through the region. The project also supports investment in new farming options which can only be undertaken with irrigation. The growing of small seeds, for example, which is now a significant economic activity in inland Canterbury, small seeds and arable crops are grown under irrigation. Financial returns to HBRIC and to council and therefore to ratepayers we believe are reasonable. There's a reasonable return over the life of the project. There's a lower return over the uptake stages of the project. And the assets in the project, the dam, the distribution system and so on, return to public ownership at the end of the period of the 70 years of the concession, and however you want to calculate that, that will be value in today's dollars, it's hundreds of millions of dollars. Once again, that is funded essentially by water users. They've paid for it, and in the end, it returns to public ownership, except to the extent that local farmers have a partial investment in the scheme yet to be undertaken. So, turning to those financial returns in a bit more detail, over the 70-year life of the project, there is a 6.5% post-tax internal rate of return on this project. Our view is that in today's environment, that's a very satisfactory economic return. And the reason why there are 5 green pluses beside the 6.5% is that they're the 5 sets of pluses that you get in addition to the financial return. The environmental benefits that I've talked about, the Plan Change 6 benefits at no additional cost to the council, and the others you can read for yourselves. In 2014, a number of conditions precedent and a number of other preconditions were set out by the council to be satisfied before we could proceed to financial close to negotiate the absolutely final terms and the contracts. The first of those was that council be satisfied with its own legal advice, and that was done at the last meeting. And the second is that council is satisfied with the review by Deloitte of the financial aspects of the business case, and that is what we have been hearing about in public excluded earlier on, and we will hear from them shortly, and that we believe should be agreed to today. Of the 4 conditions precedent, the workability of the consents has already been agreed by council and we have confirmation of that by the other investors. 40 million cubic metres of water signed up is the specific wording of the condition precedent 2 years ago. Some months ago we came to council and said we had 42.8 million cubic metres, and today we are telling you that we have 42.6 million cubic metres, and in our view that condition precedent not only was satisfied then but remains satisfied today. The third condition precedent was to secure sufficient funding to build and operate the RWSS. It is our belief, based on term sheets, negotiations and the heavy involvement of the counterparties with us to date, that we do have sufficient funding, but that will not be confirmed until a couple of days prior to financial close. And we have proposed in our paper a process by which that confirmation will be received by council. And the fourth is that the design and construction contract is bankable. In other words, senior debt financiers will support the contract, and that construction risk is adequately dealt with by fixed time and fixed price arrangements. Again, council agreed to that some time ago in late 2015, and we are reconfirming that today. Council also asked us to provide several pieces of documentation in relation to the water user agreement, including the names of the parties, which obviously is a private matter, and some advice on the enforceability of the contract and the key terms of the water user agreement, and that has all been provided to council and is available to councillors for inspection. And the fifth precondition was that HBRC expects a 6% flat rate of return on the funds to be invested, and we, again, in late April, we confirmed that we were able to do that, and council has agreed that that is the case. And lastly, we were to keep the council informed on progress towards the achievement of these conditions, and we believe we have done that both in regular appearances and reports to council meetings, and a limited number of confidential workshops, only where there were matters that were commercially confidential to be discussed. So our view is the end of today, subject to council's agreement, we will be in a position where all of these have been confirmed, all of these have been satisfied, subject to confirmation shortly before financial close on the securing the funding. In recent weeks, there has been a change to the total cost of the project. This should really say total cost rather than the construction price, because it's a combination of the construction contract, the land, financing and others. But the total cost of the project is now $345 million. The price, if you like, for that is that we have been able to move the proportion of the construction contract that is on fixed time and fixed price from 89% to 97% of the contract, and that has de-risked the contract from our perspective. And the other good thing that has come out of this rearrangement of the contract is that up to 80% of the uptake will now be built and paid for up front as part of the fixed time, fixed price, whereas the last time we spoke with Council about this contract, it was only 50%. So that 80% is for the building of the dam, the building of the primary distribution system, and most of the secondary distribution system. Another change that has occurred as a consequence of these negotiations around the construction contract is that we were hoping to achieve delivery of water in the 1920 irrigation season. We are now not going to be able to deliver water until the 2021 irrigation season. There's a number of reasons for that. One is we are beginning to run out of time in any case, and secondly, we were potentially putting too much time pressure on the contract, which could have had impacts on both the quality and safety of the construction. So we have extended the time of the construction period. That has also de-risked the construction process for the contractor, which is why we have been able to get a bigger fraction of the contract on fixed time, fixed price. So we've gained something and they've gained something. There is a reduction in the capital cost risk because such a big proportion of it is now on fixed time, fixed price. So that makes it more secure and less risky. Our returns are still positive, but with less risk comes less return. So our returns are slightly lower than they were a month ago. Council has, as I said, approved this project subject to meeting these conditions precedent. But actually, irrespective of that, the directors of this company have to satisfy themselves that the investment is appropriate. They have to make a lot of judgments about that, and that it's consistent with the approved statement of intent for HBRIC. So I'm going to spend a bit of time working our way through the views, the advice and information that we as directors have had, and the matters on which we have explicitly expressed our judgment. There has been very extensive environmental and economic assessment, not just through the Board of Inquiry process, but since then we have undertaken very detailed engineering, technical, legal, financial and tax advice, and we very well understand the stringent environmental consent conditions for the project. The negotiations between us and all other parties have been conducted on a commercial and arm's length basis, as they should be. There are a number of decisions that we have made, and I want to spell a number of those out, and I want to confirm a number of matters about which there has been not just speculation but statements of fact in the media, many of which are completely wrong. The first is that the co-investor is a large and stable investor and invests for long-term stable returns. That's the kind of investor we want. They're in this for the long term in this project. They're a very large organisation and they're a relatively low-risk investor. That's what we like. Our liability of HBRIC is limited to the $80 million of equity that we will invest in the limited partnership if this is approved. There is no recourse beyond that $80 million of equity investment to HBRIC. There is no recourse to any of HBRIC's subsidiaries, including the Port of Napier. obviously. There is no recourse to council. There is no recourse to ratepayers. That is the limit of our liability. The limited partnership will take on a substantial amount of debt funding. That is secured over the assets of the limited partnership during the period of time that the project is in the concession phase. It's secured over the dam, the distribution system, the pumps, all the other things that are in there. There is no recourse by the lenders of that debt to HBRIC Ltd. There is no recourse by those lenders to our subsidiaries. There is no recourse to council or to ratepayers. We have had to satisfy ourselves that the $80 million of investment by us is necessary. We were satisfied with that before when we submitted the business case, and we remain satisfied that we need to invest that $80 million, in part because the cost of the project has gone up. If the cost of the project had gone down, we might not have had to invest quite this amount of money, but we do. At the current level of water sales, there is no obligation for HBRIC to inject further equity into the Ruataniwha Water Limited Partnership. That is a condition that is required by our senior debt lenders, and at the current level of water sales, there is no obligation for us to inject more equity. That ties back to the fact that our liability is limited to the $80 million. The rate of return to us over the 70-year project at 6.5% post-tax is, in our view, commercially acceptable for this kind of asset. We have had to take a lower rate of return over the first 15 years of operations, and that rate of return is less than commercial. Compensating for that, if you like, is the fact that there are significant environmental and wider economic benefits to Hawke's Bay. Part of our reason for accepting a lower rate of return is that keeps the water price down. That means uptake will be quicker, and if uptake is quicker, then the wider economic benefits arrive sooner. That's all good for Hawke's Bay. After the uptake period, we get a commercial rate of return, the same rate of return as the other investor in the project, in the order of 10% post-tax. And when the project ends, council or HBRIC Ltd, who knows what the form will be in 70 years' time, has a very valuable asset that will continue to generate revenue. We've considered this project against a balance of our statement of intent objectives. The words in here, the key words in here, are largely taken from the objectives in our statement of intent. So the RWSS generates environmental and biodiversity and economic and community benefits. That's set out in our statement of intent. We believe it is a secure and sustainable investment with an adequate return, although it has an initial slower route to profitability. Those words are also in our statement of intent. It supports the key environmental goals in Council's strategy because it delivers a significant component of what Plan Change 6 requires for the RWSS in the minimum and flushing flows. Key environmental goals in Council strategy are also words that are in our statement of intent, in our objectives. It provides resilient infrastructure. That phrase is also in our objectives, in our statement of intent. And that resilient infrastructure enhances the economic well-being of the region. That phrase is also in our statement of intent objectives. So, having considered all of those matters, we, the HBRIC Ltd directors, believe the investment case is compelling. Investment on the terms agreed between us and the counterparties, subject to final confirmation, is appropriate for HBRIC Ltd and is consistent with HBRIC Ltd's statement of intent agreed with the council. What happens from here, assuming that council agrees that we are in a position to proceed to final negotiations, we certainly will undertake a process of generating some more water sales. The more water sales we generate, the faster the project generates returns for us and for the public. We'll go into final negotiations with the constructor, the investors and financiers. If there are any material adverse changes in those, of course, we will advise council of those. At the end of that process, we will have secured and completely confirmed the funding, and we will confirm that to, this says to HBRC management, but it should say to HBRC. And I understand there's a piece of process discussion about how exactly that will work to come. And then we will finalise and sign the documentation for the project, which we expect to be in August. There are a couple of subsidiaries of ours that need to be established, and the general partner of the limited partnership needs to be established, so those will have to be done for the process for the organisation to get underway, assuming everything else has been done. There's interest in iwi investment in this project, and there has always been provision for that. So over this very short next period, we will be reviewing that with iwi investors, and we would hope to have something secured there, and we certainly welcome that investment. At the present stage, as we have already advised council, the hydroelectricity generation component is not going to be installed initially because it doesn't make financial sense right at the present time to do that. We will have another go round of reviewing that, whether that makes sense, because we know that there is interest from the council as to whether or not that should be included. And we will review and establish the governance arrangements for the limited partnership and our own subsidiaries. And we have received from council a request to change our statement of intent to include particular environmental representation in those governance arrangements. And we have already adopted that change into our statement of intent and returned it to council. And then at some point in the future, assuming all these things have been done, then construction will commence. So, Chairman, I don't know whether you want to take questions right now or whether you want to proceed to...
I'm actually just thinking we'd probably round the conversation off with Deloitte presented, and then we have questions of both parties.
That would be perfectly fine for us. So
Yeah,
I might just
okay.
change places with Alan then.
Thank you.